Well, guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a pretty big update for the city, and it really comes down to one reason, and that is lights. All right, guys, so how cool is this? The city finally has lighting. I know it has been a long time in the making. Truthfully, it was just something that we were kind of scared to get into because we didn't know enough about it, and it seems very daunting at first, especially with all the wires and kind of figuring out how everything fits together. But truthfully, it's really making the city feel like Los Angeles, especially with the police cars. And as you guys know, our new city rebuild is basically LA. So this is really starting to make it feel like our home, like Southern California, and we love it, even with the traffic lights and everything else that we've put in so far. So let me show you guys around because it has been a lot of fun installing all of this. It's been a little tedious, but truthfully not as hard as we figured it would be, and the results came out great. We come down here all the time and can't believe how awesome and realistic this looks with lighting. I mean, it really brings the city to life and just makes it stand out. So I want to show you guys around, and again, we don't have the entire city lit up. We only have a section of the city, but it gives you kind of a flavor for what's to come in the future as we order more parts and more lights and get them installed. So we're going to show you what brand we're using as well as some cool features of the brand. And then we're going to show you kind of everything with the lights on. So let me go ahead and flip those on. And as you can see, you can even still see the LEDs during the day. But what's really cool is how well all the wires are hidden and hard to see. I think we did a pretty good job for this being our first time, but honestly, the product itself makes it very easy to do this. So who are we using? Well, we're using LEDs by Bevan's Bricks. And if you aren't familiar, Daryl, who runs it, is a great guy. He's been around in the Lego business and hobby for a long time, but he makes these kits that are very easy to implement if you're not, an electrician or you don't know enough about wiring. I mean, neither do we, and we set all this up in about a day. So highly encourage you to check him and his website out. You can find him at bevansbricks.com, and his lighting is very cheap compared to a lot of competitors out there. He's got really cool things like traffic lights. Like you'll see here, it all automatically changes on its own. And it just adds like a new level of sophistication and realism to the city that I think we were lacking in the past. We've always gone for more of a realistic build and more of a realistic city. But by adding lighting, even just small little things to like the menu board of the In-N-Out, for example, it really, really brings the city to life. And I can't believe we didn't do this sooner, truthfully. It's also really easily controllable. We have everything hardwired underneath the table right now with buttons to turn it on. But he also has remotes and other cool battery packs and things to make it come alive. But by far the coolest feature is this removable kind of modular lighting system for cars. So basically it's hardwired inside the car, and then there's a little plate on the road where you place the car. And it's so cool because you don't have to have hardwiring throughout. You can basically move cars freely throughout your city by just lifting them and placing them on the plates throughout the city. It's such a cool idea, and I'm really glad that he came out with it. It's just made our city feel so much more realistic at the street level. And if you look, we do have some other things that are hardwired, such as like the roof of the 7-Eleven. You can see the wires there. So there are ways to get around this with more of a modular build. But for us, we just wanted to hardwire that to kind of get it up and running. But other vehicles, I mean, if you look like, for example, the Bronco, if I just pick it up, it detaches and the lights turn off, obviously, because there's no electricity. We still need a tile around the plate. But what's really cool is everything is contained within the vehicle. And then there's just a little tiny plate on the bottom that connects to the road where the electricity comes through. So if I place it back, you can see like as soon as you put it on and basically straighten it, boom, now it's connected and the lights are on. I mean, how cool is that? So you can basically move around and move your vehicles around without worrying about them being hardwired. It's such a cool feature. I also want to touch on some other things that are new in the city since you last saw a city update. Again, we were out sick last week with a terrible stomach virus, but we're back, and here are some updates that we've made. So we basically finished this tunnel over here. We did a different style compared to the other tunnels that we've done, because if you've ever driven through LA, there are a lot of different architectural features along the bridges and freeways. So we wanted to capture that here by not making them all the same. We wanted to make them a little bit different. And what's cool is basically the tunnel will go through the first overpass and then underneath the 7-Eleven. Originally, we thought about putting a basketball court over there, but it's just a little too small, so I think the 7-Eleven fits in really well. But basically, the cars pass underneath, and it takes them to the beach cities, which is labeled with the freeway sign indicating that they're headed towards the beach cities, just like you'd find in Santa Monica. We then had to install and recreate new traffic lights. This was purely due to the wiring. The wiring just didn't work on our old style traffic lights. As you can see, it just would have had a lot of wires sticking out. There wasn't enough interior or internal room, like a void for the wires. So we went with Bevan's hang down design, but then we changed the actual build of the traffic light to kind of be our own. You can see some wires sticking through the street. We want to fix that in the future. But for the most part, most of the wires are pretty well hidden. And I really actually do enjoy these traffic lights and how they turned out. I think they actually look a lot like the ones you find in LA with the gray and then the black. So I think it's actually a pretty good upgrade for the city. And now the added bonus with the added LEDs, it just makes it look super cool at night or when the lights are off. See, look. And they were actually pretty easy to install. The little microchip where you plug in the wires is pretty well labeled, so you know which side to plug in for which light. And even though they're small and it's harder if you have bigger fingers, you can get some tweezers to plug it in and just basically hide everything underneath the road. And it just comes out great. I mean, it looks awesome. So moving on back to the 7-Eleven area. So again, this was going to be a basketball court, but honestly, it was just a little bit too small when we started laying it out. So putting it in a convenience store not only feels a little bit more like what you'd actually find in LA or Santa Monica, but I think it also adds a really nice new build for lighting, which with a basketball court, I mean, you could have done some lights and stuff to light up the court, but it just wouldn't have been as cool in our opinion. So I think having it as a 7-Eleven will create some cool lighting, and it basically just heads down onto the freeway from there with that freeway sign, which is also lit up. So it's a very, traditional LA scene, if you will, and I think it just came out great. Moving on, we finished the roads and finished some of the bike path. We're waiting on more parts, but basically that is all finally filled in down here. That was, it took so long. It took so much longer than it should have, but finally it's all coming together. Still have some pieces and parts, obviously, that we're waiting on for the rest of the sidewalk, but overall it's really coming together. And we also put some of the old beach back just to kind of see what it would look like. Again, this whole area is going to be the beach in the future, but this kind of gives a feel for what it'll look like, and it'll feed into basically downtown Santa Monica, and that's what we're going for down here at this end. So looking at the city as a whole, you can see it's definitely starting to get built out. Downtown area and the freeway is still a work in progress. We actually finally got parts in for the Wilshire Grand, so that's going to be kind of our next project. It's that big blue glass building down here. We'd love to finish this and finally kind of top it off. It's sat idle in this kind of construction phase for a few weeks now, just given the holidays and the delays with Bricklink. I think now that we finally have the parts in, we should hopefully have this updated by the next video, but we're loving how it's coming out. The details on the side came out great. And I think, looking down here in the Santa Monica area, everything's low rise, but in the back, it's going to be high rise. And speaking of this area, again, this is the only area that's lit up right now. So basically this quadrant of streets is the only thing that's wired so far. We wanted to start with this and kind of focus on getting all the details figured out and how the wiring would fit underneath the streets. But the goal is to eventually then expand that into the freeways and the back of the city and all that area. But this has been the core focus just down here. So here it is with the lights on. And if I turn the overhead lights off, you get a good feel for what is actually wired so far. It's literally just this quadrant. But again, a lot of details went into all of the small little lights in this quadrant. I mean, you'd be amazed how much wiring and lighting actually went into just lighting up that section. So there's a lot more that needs to be done behind the scenes before we can light up the rest, including like this building, for example. We've got to figure out how we're going to light that up, and also kind of tie everything together in a way that doesn't overload the sockets, and eventually expand into the freeway area, downtown, lighting up the skyscrapers. I think that'll be super cool. But for now, it's really just this quadrant that we've started with, and it's been a lot of work, but also a ton of fun. And hats off again to Bevan's Bricks for coming out with amazing products that are relatively easy to install and pretty easy to figure out. It's been by far the best lighting product we've experienced thus far. In the next city update, we hope to start adding pedestrians back to the streets and kind of bring the city back alive. Obviously, there's still a lot of vehicles missing and the streets are pretty barren. So that is kind of our next focus, is to start setting back the details from the move, and then also just adding more lights, because I mean, it just looks so freaking cool when the lights are off and everything's lit up. I mean, I just can't get over how much the city has come to life. So anyway, guys, that is it for this week's update. Thanks again for following along with our rebuild, and make sure you subscribe so you can catch future episodes. But that's it for today's video. Thanks again for watching, and we will see you next video.